Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Islamic Economics series. All right, today we're diving into a paper that, honestly, is designed to shake things up. It asks a question that could basically invalidate an entire area of study. What if all this talk about the methodology of Islamic economics is just a complete waste of time? So the paper we're looking at is by the scholar Zubair Hassan, and he doesn't pull any punches. He puts this question right out there, front and center. Is this even a topic worth our time and energy? And right away, he gives his answer. It's not a maybe or an it depends. He flat out says no. The answer is negative. I mean, wow. For a scholar to say the very methodology of his field isn't worth discussing, that's a huge statement. So we've got to ask, how does he get there? Let's dig into his argument. Okay, so where does he even begin to build this case? Well, it all starts at the very foundation. He argues that there's this fundamental clash of worldviews between mainstream economics and Islamic economics, and you can't reconcile them. First up is something philosophers call the is-ought problem. Think about it this way. Mainstream economics tries really hard to be a what is science. It's descriptive. It just wants to explain the world as it functions. But Islamic economics, it can't do that. Its entire purpose is prescriptive. It's about what ought to be. It starts with a moral and ethical framework from Revelation and works from there. And that difference bleeds into how each field even thinks about knowledge. Mainstream economics relies on what Hassan calls reason, empirical data, stuff you can measure and test. But the Islamic tradition uses something he calls intellect. This isn't just reason. It's reason plus what he calls sapience, that intuitive wisdom you get from Revelation. It's a totally different toolkit. So you end up with two completely opposite workflows. Think about Adam Smith. He looked at the world around him, at capitalism taking shape, and then he built his theories. The flow was from reality to doctrine. Islamic economics tries to do the exact opposite. It starts with the doctrine, the divine blueprint, and then tries to make reality conform to it. You see the problem? One is descriptive, the other is prescriptive. And this is where Hassan says a huge analytical mistake happens. Trying to go from a perfect doctrine to a messy reality, especially when you start comparing economic systems, leads to what he calls a massive fallacy. He says, look, what so many Islamic economists do is they take this beautiful, perfect, idealized Islamic system on paper, a system that has never fully existed, and they compare it to the messy, complicated, often ugly reality of capitalism as it's practiced today. And as Hassan says himself, you just can't compare likes with unlikes. It's like comparing apples with oranges, or as he puts it, parrots with crows. It's just not a valid comparison, right? You can't take a perfect blueprint of a building and compare it to a real-world building that's been lived in for 50 years and say, see, my blueprint is better. It's naive, and any conclusions you draw about which one is superior are basically worthless. It's an intellectual dead end. But Hassan's critique doesn't stop at the philosophical level. He gets even more pointed when he starts looking at what's actually happening on the ground, in the research itself. And what he sees, frankly, is a field in crisis. He gives this crisis a name, the econometric syndrome. And what is that? It's this obsession, this compulsive need to just copy Western research methods, especially all the complex quantitative modeling. It's like, just to seem legitimate or scientific, researchers are grabbing these econometric tools and using them everywhere, even when they make absolutely no sense for the topic at hand. And the fallout from this syndrome? It's pretty devastating. It completely stifles any real creative thinking. Instead of innovation, you just get imitation. The data used is often shaky at best, and the policy recommendations that come out of it, nobody actually uses them. But worst of all, it feeds into something really, really negative. He calls it academic predation. You know, the whole publish or perish pressure in academia? Well, this syndrome encourages researchers to just churn out cookie-cutter econometric papers with very little real substance, and then pay to get them published in these shady, low-quality journals. It creates this false image of progress, but in reality, it's just hollowing out the entire intellectual integrity of the field. So, okay, he's torn down the philosophical foundations, he's criticized the research practices. What's the final verdict? Well, this is where he brings it back to the real world with some cold, hard data. His point is this: Islamic economics constantly claims to be morally superior, that it can create a more just and equitable society. Well, fine. But if that's the claim, you have to show the results, right? The proof has to be in the pudding, not just in the high-minded theory. And to back this up, he points to data from the 2018 World Inequality Report. Let's take a look. This chart shows what percentage of a nation's income goes to the top 10% of earners, and the results are pretty shocking. What the data shows is a huge paradox. The place with the highest income inequality in the world, it's the Middle East, the heartland of the Islamic world, where the top 10% take home an incredible 61% of the income. Compare that to secular Europe, which is the most equal region on the chart. And he points out this isn't a one-off thing. The trend from 1990 to 2016 shows this inequality has been consistently rising. And this is why he comes back to his original point. For Hassan, endlessly debating abstract methodology while this kind of real-world inequality persists is worse than useless. It's a dangerous distraction. When you have such huge problems on the ground, arguing about theoretical ideals isn't just unproductive, it's irresponsible. So in the end, Hassan's paper isn't really about tearing everything down. It's a call to action. He's saying stop the philosophical hair-splitting and start tackling the real substantive issues: poverty, inequality, injustice. And that leaves us with a really tough question, doesn't it? If he's right, if methodology is a distraction, then where should the energy and focus of Islamic economics actually go to make a real, tangible difference in people's lives? See you in the next one. Subscribe, like, and comment.